Hello, friends. I'm Barbara Hemphill, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and vision accelerator. Welcome to Christine Smith's From Pretty Good to Radiant Joy podcast, with practical and inspiring ideas about the healing, love, and power of God. Christine and her guests encourage you to enjoy the radiant, joyful life God created you to live. Christine is a trained spiritual director with a heart for unity. She's an author focused on Holy Spirit's role in women's lives, especially women over 50. Let's welcome my sister in Christ and yours, Christine Smith.
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the podcast today, where our guest is Debra L. Butterfield. She is an author and editor, and she's better known as Deb. And we welcome you today, Deb. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, Christine.
So Deb and I have met each other through a Christian writers group, and she is a much more experienced than I am author and writer. She has a powerful story. She has books of nonfiction and fiction, both short stories and novels and articles, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
And she has, I think, a very interesting life background. She was in the Marines. How did you happen to go into the Marines, and what did you do there? And where were you?
Well, I went into the Marines because when I was 18, my parents said you join the service or you go to college. Neither of which I really wanted to do.
Mhm.
I just wanted to go get a job, figure out what I wanted in life. But I decided I would join the service. Both of my parents had been in the Marine Corps, and initially I wanted the Air Force. The Air Force recruiter was very sexist. And, we're talking 1974. This is, before women's liberation, right? And so the Navy recruiter never came to town, and the Marine Corps guy did. And I thought, well, how bad can the Marines be? Because both of my parents were in the Marines. And so I saw the recruiter and joined the Marines.
And where did you go from there?
I spent 3.5 years at Camp Lejeune, which is in North Carolina at Jacksonville. And my job, military occupational specialty, the military calls it, was truck driver. So for the first 1.5 years, I went to driver school, number one, and then they put me in motor transport. And again, I remind you, this is 1974. They didn't want women there, and they transferred me out. I was a driver for a colonel for 1.5 years, and then I requested a transfer and was transferred into another unit. And within that unit, then I drove 2.5-ton trucks and other big military equipment. So
Probably not exactly what you expected.
no, it wasn't. But it was fun. My favorite vehicle was the Jeep, and we were, World War II Jeeps, the kind you see in the movies, right? During World War II.
You lived overseas too, in Germany?
In Germany, right? That came, well, long time later. I was in Germany from 1987 to 1991. We were actually living there when the wall fell, the Berlin Wall fell. So beautiful town, beautiful country.
Yeah. And Hawaii?
Yes. The military takes you all kinds of places, right? I was in Hawaii with my then husband, for 3 years. He was based at Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station, although he was not a pilot.
When did you start your writing career?
Well, I started writing when I was a preteen, and I would write Star Trek fan fictions, what it would be called now. It was just, stories about Star Trek. But professionally, I actually began when I was 45 years old, and I was working for Folks on the Family at the time. in an account management position, and I applied to be one of their copywriters and was hired. So officially, that's when I began my professional writing career.
And I think you told me when we had a conversation earlier that your first love was always fiction.
Yes, yeah, it has been. Fiction in the sense that I really would have preferred to write screenplays. You know, I have no trouble writing dialogue whatsoever. It's all the description in between that I struggle with. But I didn't know how to sell a screenplay. And I knew that, you know, selling a book would be way easier. So I just kind of made that transition. And but my first book was not fiction. My first book was as titled Help, My Husband Has Sexually Abused My Daughter. And that was published in 2007, and then through a self-publishing company. When that contract ran out, then I discontinued it. I revised the book and added to it, doubled it in size, and retitled it. So that book launched in 2015, and it's called Carried by Grace.
Carried, right? Carried, Carried by Grace.
Yes, Carried.
And I imagine that you have done quite a bit of work with women who have had that some kind of an experience of being the mother of some. No?
No, the book came strictly out of my own experience. And I have spoken to groups of women. When I moved here to St. Joe, well, I moved here to St. Joe before I wrote the book, and that's partly how the book came about, was the fact that I couldn't find full-time employment. And I thought, well, they always encouraged me to write a book about that when I was working at Focus, so I decided it was time. And I took a copy of the very first one down to the women's shelter that the YWCA here in town ran. And she had me come speak to a group of women every year. And that's pretty much what we talked about, was just the whole scenario of your child being abused. And surprisingly enough, a lot of the women, once I broke the ice with the subject, afterwards, when we have a time of discussion, there would be several women that would say, this happened to me. You know, my dad abused me. And it was very touching because a lot of times they had never told anyone. But
Yes.
because I had been there to talk to them, I was in a position making myself vulnerable to them. It helped them feel safe, I think, enough that they could actually say, yeah, this happened to me.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, Christine, I have never, ever had another woman come to me and say, yes, I am the mom of this situation. And I really don't know why that is.
Oh, I just got some chills there.
Mm.
So I, I work in healing and deliverance ministry. So I have talked to many women who were either the victims themselves or whose children were victims. I've even talked to men who were victims. So, and many of them also have not talked to anyone else about it, but they're in this situation in a safe space where they've come for healing, prayer, and deliverance from all the residual effects that can happen from going through something like that. So it's amazing, really, how you have had no one come to you to talk about that. I'm rather shocked, actually.
Well, I mean, it kind of surprises me too. Even in a church group, where maybe I've spoken about this. There will be women that will say, yeah, I was the victim, but I've never had a moms come up to me and say, thank you for this book. I've had readers email me and say thank you, but I've never been speaking to a group and they've come up to me and say, I'm right there with you.
Wow. Wow. Well, I know you had, you were promoting the book this month because it was a month of awareness of abuse. I don't know if it was sexual abuse in particular or all kinds of abuse.
Yeah, I think that the month, it's kind of started out as sexual abuse awareness, but I think it's kind of enveloped everything that involves domestic abuse, abuse of any kind. So, so yeah, April is Abuse Awareness Month, and I always like to promote the book during that month, and I usually drop the price on it for that reason, so that it's more accessible to people that need it.
Yeah. Of course, this is going to air at the beginning of May, but are you open if somebody would like to talk as a mother of a victim? Would you be open to talking to them?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
So I think we want to invite anybody who's listening who was touched by, has had to experience that and is touched by the fact that there is somebody willing to be out there in public about it with your book and speaking about it and even available to talk to. That's amazing. Well, Deb, with all the work that you do with other people, I guess the biggest question in your life is, were you able to help your daughter, and was she able to get other help to be okay?
Yes, we got extensive counseling, and my daughter got extensive counseling, and we're 30 some years past it now, and she is now a licensed therapist. So she actually has the ability to be able to counsel people who have gone through exactly what she went through.
That's one of those things where God works everything together for good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
That and the book itself, I see the book as God's way of bringing good out of it as well.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Well, praise the Lord for that.
Yeah.
And then you wrote some other nonfiction books before you started publishing fiction?
Yes. The publisher that I am a part of, I'm a business partner now. I wasn't when the books were first published, but we put together some anthology devotionals that have my name to them and have my stories in them.
Mm-hmm.
So those came first, and then I wrote some books for writers. And then finally, I think it was in 2019, so it hasn't been that long, that I finally published my first novel. I did publish a short story, very short story, less than 10,000 words. 2012, maybe? I can't quite remember when I published that one, but that one's been out for quite a while.
Was the first novel in this what I saw on your website about the Inheritance series?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What is that series? What is the fundamental thing that links together the books in that series?
The character receives an inheritance, and so I really threw a lot of myself into these books, and she comes from a very typical, well, not a typical background. The character is an orphan and was adopted. Then the adoptive mother dies, and the adoptive father turns abusive.
Oh.
So she doesn't have a typical background, but she has a really hard time accepting the inheritance. And so the series is all about her. Initially, she has to claim the inheritance because there's a string attached that she has to spend so much time at this ranch before she can actually get the inheritance. And then the other two books are about her discovering more of the depth of the inheritance, because there's way more to the inheritance than just the money that she receives.
Mhm.
And book 3 is all about her embracing it. So the titles of the books give the reader a clue as to what the main story is. So in the first book, she's claiming her inheritance. In book 2, she's discovering more about her inheritance. And then in book 3, she's learning how to embrace the full inheritance, because like I said, there's way more involved than just money.
And is the inheritance that she's dealing with a metaphor for our spiritual inheritance or anything like that?
That's part of it. Mhm. Yeah, that's part of it. She does also, another aspect of the inheritance, aside from the spiritual side of things, is that she discovers a new family.
Oh. Well, I don't want you to have to give away too much about what the book is about, but I know you have a tagline that is, what is it? It's about loving something stories with, you say it,
Stories that stir your spirit.
stir your spirit. Okay. So uh, what do you think makes a story stir someone's spirit?
A story that, for me, that stirs my spirit is a story that touches me on my spiritual level, more than just, the external. Romance is very popular, and for one, romance is very formulaic. And after a while, I mean, I find an author that I enjoy reading and they write lots of books, but then I get to maybe the 5th or 6th book, and suddenly the stories just seem like they're the same. All they've done is change the names and the location. And it's always kind of, it becomes very easy to predict the plot.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to, I do what C.S. Lewis did. I read this quote decades ago that he wrote the kinds of books that he likes to read.
Yeah.
And I really took that to heart. So in my fiction, I throw things into my stories that are things that people struggle with on a deep level. Like, does God love me? And am I valuable to the world? What value do I have to offer to the world? Things that are, deep down in
Yes.
your spirit kind of stuff. And so that's why I say they're stories that stir your spirit, because they will touch you. I hope, that's my intent, that they will touch the reader on a spiritual level and not just an entertainment level.
So since you're looking at self-worth and empowerment and knowing God's love and things like that, do the books, or do you in your speaking address sort of practical ways, or I'm sure you have verses that you use that support some of this, but are there ways that you help people to overcome those issues?
Trying to think some of the topics. It's been a long time, and it's been a long time since I've talked to a women's group. But yes, I would very much enjoy speaking to women's groups to help empower them to be who God created them to be. Um, Unfortunately, so much of our childhood, we really aren't taught how to be who God created us to be. We're taught how to survive in the world,
Or how to be who our parents want us to be?
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Learn a skill, grow up, get a job, but that skill might not have anything to do with the passion that God put inside you. And so most people are going through life in jobs they really don't like, because they've never been allowed to develop the passion that God put in them.
yeah. Yeah, it's sad that our culture, our world is so really kind of hides from us that we're born with a God-given heart's desire, passion, purpose, and our identities are, we're all made in the image and likeness of God, but we're all given a different set of gifts and talents and interests and heart's desires. And we're created for the particular time, such a time as this for each one, and with these special qualities, and that mean we're here to do something that no one else can do quite like we can do.
Oh, exactly. As children, they love it when we use our imaginations, but at some point they say, okay, it's time to stop daydreaming.
Yeah.
And that's where that shift begins, from allowing us to use our imaginations, because in our imaginations, we're going to go toward what passion, that unique gift that God put in us. But when we're told to stop, then that's when that passion starts getting pushed down and squelched.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about imagination that way too, because of course, as a fiction writer, you need your imagination to do what you do all the time.
Definitely. Yeah, it takes a lot of imagination, and I do struggle. I mean, it's not it's not like ideas are pouring out of me every day. And right now I'm actually having some real struggles in getting book 3 written. But I think part of that just is because uh, it has an element of romance, and I have a hard time with romance. So I think that's part of what's making this book a little harder for me to write.
Interesting though, because you are in charge of what your topic is. You're in charge of whether it has romance in it or not. And so you put it in it, and now you got to deal with it.
Well, it was one of it was a case of in the first book, she meets this guy, and by the end of the book, he's saying, I think I'm falling in love with you. So it's kind of and actually, when I wrote the first book, I intended it to be a standalone. But I closed it out in a way that if I decided to write another one, I could. And a lot of my readers were, in their reviews, they were saying, I hope there's going to be another one with this same character. Da, da, da. So I decided, okay, I guess I better, build it out and make it a series. And I figured that I would, I had to do something with that relationship between the main character and the guy that she meets. So yeah, I kind of undercut myself on that one.
But challenges are good, right? So
Yeah.
you meet the challenge, might learn something about yourself in the process, or who knows,
Yeah. It's been fun, and I have actually. Um, I learn about myself, I think, with every book I write, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So
Well, I think that's true. My creativity has taken on two forms. One is quilting and the other is writing. And I would say I learn about myself in each of the things that I create like that. Even like the quilt that's behind us. It started off that I was going on a retreat, and I just picked up some fabrics that I had not been using. I had been collecting Japanese fabrics, and they felt too precious to cut into. But I was going on this retreat, and I didn't know what else I was going to do. And, I suppose it might even be a prompting of the spirit that I picked up these things and brought them with me. And I ended up making this quilt. And because it's curved, I used a lot of this fabric, and I used it all up, and I had a lot of fun in the process, but I also realized it was about letting go, because I had been kind of holding on to this fabric as too precious to cut into. And I found as I was working on it, I kept getting this thing about, see what happens when you let go, when you let go. I mean, I enjoy this a whole lot more as a quilt than I did as having a stack of fabric on a shelf.
Yeah.
But
And
I had to learn that lesson through the creative process.
yeah.
And
And that is a beautiful quilt.
thank you. It's just, it's a fun one, and it reminds me when I look at it, if I'm getting stuck on something, just let go, let God, all those things. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and in the nonfiction stuff, of course, I think it's always kind of fun to write about something that you don't really completely get it or understand it or haven't yet embodied it. And then as you work on it, it opens the door for you to do that, to
You,
learn from it.
I learn and I grow
Yeah.
in that process.
Yeah. So would you encourage do you encourage people who don't yet write and publish to think about doing that if they have a story to share? I mean, I suppose most everybody has a story that could be shared.
Yeah, probably everybody has a story that can be shared, but it could be that God has a different way for them to share it. It could be more through speaking. But if they have even an inkling of a desire to write, I would encourage them to try it, rather than to just keep pushing that desire away, because that desire is there for a reason. More than likely, it's because God placed that desire there. So I know that it can certainly be scary writing a book for the first time, but there's lots of help out there on the internet. And of course, there's that group that we belong to. I don't know whether you want to promote that or not, but there's lots of help out there. And I really think that people can be more fulfilled in their life if they at least step out into those desires and do something about them rather than always just pushing them away.
Right. And of course, they don't need to start with a book. They could write an article, they could do a blog, they could even just write for their family to some kind of a memoir, whatever.
Exactly.
Well, Deborah, is there anything that you would like to share that I haven't asked you about that's some encouragement for the listeners?
I would encourage readers to reach out and try new authors, read new authors, and discover exciting new books. For those of the listeners that are interested in writing, give your hand a try and just be brave and step out and do like Christine said, let go.
Thank you very much. One other thing that occurs to me is just the idea that reading fiction is something I grew up passionate about reading. I used to have flashlight under the covers, even if it was just Nancy Drew books, but I was always reading. And then as I got older, I got so serious about getting things done that I didn't have time for that much reading of fiction. But, I'm now in a book club that reads all different kinds of books, some fiction, some nonfiction. And I've really sort of rediscovered the joy of reading for pleasure or for just because you want to. And I think it's so important because we tend to sometimes not remember to rest or to relax. And reading is such a nice way to be resting, relaxing, and also, taking your mind on a little trip and journeying with it.
That's true. Very true.
Well, Deb, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad we were able to connect, and I will see more of you in the writing world.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me.